Cowardice asks, the question, is it safe? Expediency asks, the question, is it politic? Vanity asks, the question, is it popular? But conscience asks, the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because conscience tells him it is right.
Every time our country stands in the path of danger, an instinct seems to summon her finest first, those who truly understand her. When freedom shivers in the cold shadow of true peril, it's always the patriots who first hear the call. When loss of liberty is looming, as it is now, the siren sounds first in the hearts of freedom's vanguard.
Fighting for humanity and against globalism, one mind at a time. It's the Freedom Link with Joe Joseph.
Well, it's another exciting adventure here at Freedom Link. Yes, folks, Joe Joseph, Scotty Lopez here. 23rd of September. Isn't the 25th of September one of those days that they always have that like a conspiracy on? Isn't that one of those meme dates?
Was it the 25th or was it the
22nd?
It's somewhere around this time, right?
Yeah.
Right,
But it's one of those meme dates, one of those things. KGRADB.com. Don't forget to check out the website and subscribe to the YouTube and the Rumble and all that stuff. Yes, sir, Bob. We have a very interesting agenda tonight. Yes, the agenda, of course, always to kind of bring out a little bit of what's really going on behind the scenes, geopolitically. I don't know, any other way. There's always some history
events,
involved. Current events. And then also the techie stuff and the geek stuff and the nerd stuff and that other conspiracy stuff. So here we go. BlackRock. BlackRock, just so everybody understands, is a company that is extremely powerful in terms of, shall we say, everything. Yes.
Right.
You want to know why?
They're becoming one of these major. This is one of these major corporations that have been flying under the radar that I think people really need to be paying attention to as
huge attention.
Probably being one of the main quote unquote, boogeymen of the sort of corporate new world order agenda.
Yeah.
Sort of
between them
things,
and the tech, between them and the tech companies, I have to say that you kind of have like a triad going, like the Hong Kong mafia back in the day, where you've got your corporate Wall Street peeps, you've got your tech side, which is like your social media, the public square, if you will, and then you got the government. And those three kind of form a triad that really rivals. It's a similar structure to that of the like I said, the Hong Kong mafia back in the day. So that's why when I see things like racketeering, it really pisses me off, because I mean, that is all our government does and is racketeer. And if you look at like RICO statutes and things like that, RICO, geez, I mean, the government and all these big corporations are really complicit in so many different ways when it comes to that. But BlackRock is, I would say, partially, if not responsible, say, for the housing crisis we're in right now. So a lot of people don't understand that prior to I don't want to say deregulation is a good thing or bad thing, but there were rules in place, as far as I know, preventing these mutual funds, hedge funds, from getting into real estate. And well, they did, but it wasn't as prevalent it was more commercial real estate. It never really delved into residential real estate and single family homes. And so as time's gone on and the shenanigans continue and bubbles are blown up, they need to find places for higher returns. And it's a very simple concept, supply and demand. If you don't have a lot of things, the price is going to be higher. Whereas if you do have abundance, then prices moderate. And housing has really gone up. I mean, let's face it, the crisis or the real estate bubble of like 2000 to 2006, 7, and then it went poof, and everybody was upside down on their houses, meaning that they owed more than it was worth. To the point where the government had to intervene and provide a tax credit to bolster the real estate market because it had collapsed. And that's when the shenanigans began with these funds to bolster the market. The problem is now it is such an attractive way to get a return that they've dove into the rental market and have even gone as far as doing house flipping, believe it or not, on a mass scale. And what it does is it artificially, how do you say it? It artificially inflates the price of housing because they hoard it. They own it all. They're buying it all up. When you go to buy a house, chances are there's a BlackRock representative somewhere in there that's jacking that price up.
It creates a form of scarcity.
Very much so. Very much so. So when you look at that as a form and a very, very important factor in inflation, BlackRock and the government are complicit, and they're not the only ones that do it. However, when you're managing over 10 to 11 trillion dollars in assets, you have incredible power over the economy and can do a lot of damage searching for that return. Because think about it. It's no different than the guy that bought all the cocoa up that year and half of it went rotten in the warehouse. But did he care? No, because he created a scarcity. And then you start selling it at a higher price. And he made a fortune. And it's legal. And you could do it. That's the problem. So that's part of it. And then you've got the environmental social governance agenda, right? Which is basically Agenda 2030 baked into corporate America. That has done a lot of damage on one end, right? So you got ESG, and a lot of people have vilified DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That used to just be understood at some point in time early in my career in the military, was that we all worked together. We were all the same. We're all human. And guess what?
You just hire people on the basis of their merit, not on their skin color or anything like that, right?
No, it's of their ability, right? What they can do. Right. Can you help me make money for my business? Can we get ahead together? Let's do this. That kind of thing. DEI does not work without merit. You've got to have some sort of merit-based system, even within a DEI structure, in order for that to be successful. Because if you just promote people on the basis of race, you're not doing anybody a service. Not the person.
They've taken DEI and they've twisted it into something.
It's gone too far. And they've taken merit, that merit-based system, and they've manipulated it in such a way that it's causing a loss of productivity. And because you have a loss of productivity, you're not cranking out as much, and you're going to cause shortages. And you're seeing that more and more. You're seeing a void of knowledge that has resulted in a lot of skilled labor positions remaining vacant, even though the economy is slowing. They're still looking for it. See, that's not typical. That's why they're having such problems trying to figure this out. It's really not that hard to see. The baby boomers and Gen X were the last generations that had enough skilled labor that industry and the economy could absorb all those jobs, and consumerism, which is what we are, useless eaters we are, would go ahead and it would be the fuel for that engine, and it was. And there was more skilled labor as time went on, and automation became ever more efficient and better. There was more skilled labor than there was positions, oftentimes, unless the economy was really cranking. And then during downturns, you would know because you'd have a deft of like a big pool of people that are looking for work but are not being able to get a job, right? Whereas now it's flip-flopped. And the reason is a couple of reasons. And it's caused a crisis. Student loan, right? When government took over student loans, that was the death nail for us, because it took everybody and steered them away from the trades, and it put everybody into 4-year degrees. And either you flamed out and you go into the labor force, or you get a 4-year degree, and now you've got supply and demand. So many engineering 4-year degrees that you can get what, $45K, $50K maybe as an entry-level engineer. You can't pay your student loans with that, going to a prestigious university. But because you can't be denied and you just get them, you just go and rack up massive amounts of debt. And then you come out and you're heavy in debt and you can't get a job worth of crap. Meanwhile, the skilled labor force, which is a very important part of the economic engine of this country, just suffers. The average age of a skilled labor technician in New England, 58 years old. 58 years old. And that's crazy, because let me tell you something. If you've lived that life by 58, and believe me, at 47, I can tell you, you're broken. You're not what you were then at 37.
Yeah, I mean, you see it all throughout manufacturing, right? Like my dad works in a metal manufacturing, and all of those guys that work out there, they're older dudes, and it's harder to get a lot of these younger workers in there, and luckily, like my two brothers are some of the younger ones out there, but a lot of these labor professions, these trade professions, it's mostly a lot of the older generation that are still, doing this, and you're not seeing a lot of new blood come in, younger generation. Yeah, and
the ones that are, the ones that are having a hard time passing functional testing and things like that to be able to make the cut. So that's the other thing. So funny enough, me being an ex-squid, like for my department, it's constant training, because you have to train. I always went by the, train the way you fight the way you train. So if you go by that philosophy, then you always want to stay sharp. You always want to try to improve yourself. That's not, let's just say that's not a driving force in younger people today, which is not to say it doesn't exist. But what I can tell you is it's just not as prevalent. And because it's not as prevalent, and because one thing COVID did was redefine how people live. And it really did. You know, they learned that you don't have to run the rat race all the time, that you can live a simpler life, that you can go without certain things. There were some positive things that came out of that. You just got to find the silver lining, and it's hard to find, but it's there. It's there.
Right.
But Scotty, it doesn't feel good.
No. And back to what you were saying, like, you know, my dad always, because he's a lead out there, and when they get these younger workers out there, you know, he's like, man, they don't know what they're doing. And, you know, it's tough on a company when they have to.
It's a loss of production.
It's a loss of production when they have to like sit there and basically train these people on the job, and
it's time lost. And so that's why. Let me tell you this. That's why the pay situation and inflation is so bad for small business, even corporations, because you spend so much money training someone or a group of people, that attrition is all money lost. You're flushing all that down the toilet when you lose someone. And now it's even more important because you can't get people through the door fast enough because there aren't anybody, that people aren't applying. They just don't show up. And you have 2 million openings, so they say. I don't know how true that is, but I can tell you that
I can believe it.
Like in an industrial maintenance world, you don't get people applying. They're not there. And if any sort of experienced help, there's a void of it, huge void. And it's bad because that contributes to inflation. See, these are all these things that people don't see. All you hear
contributes to a lot of things, not only just inflation, but just on a more core level. I mean, that contributes to the crumbling infrastructure because you don't have any workers that are able to go out there and fix things, you know.
And even if you could, the government is I'm sorry, they're so damn corrupt that no matter what, it's never enough. And there'll always be a reason why they can't. And there's never any money. But taxes go up all the time. And it's not just them, too. Amazon just came out, right? Amazon Prime. They say at the start of the year 2024, Amazon Prime is going to institute in advertising in their content. And if you don't want it, you got to pay $2.99. Well, wait a minute. But I pay already.
Yeah, I'm already paying the subscription.
But what they're saying is we're going to model it more after the cable industry. Wait a minute. The cable industry's dying because of that model. And now you're going to that model? What are you doing? You know, but because why? It's never enough. It's never enough. And it's always hunting for margins at your expense, and it's artificial inflation. That doesn't have to happen.
Right. And you're starting to see, I would say, this whole streaming service bubble starting to collapse because, you know, people are like, okay, you know, at first it's like, hey, look, you don't have to pay as much as you pay for cable. Just buy the streaming service. But when you have how many different streaming services now? So you're paying $15 for one, $15 a month for one, $15 for another, right? Because you got
it's blown up.
Netflix, Netflix, HBO Plus, Paramount Plus, Amazon Prime, you know, and depending on what show you want to watch, it might be on a different streaming service than you know, another show that you watch. So next thing you know, I mean, you're paying just as much, if not more, than you would for regular cable for all of the different streaming services that you're
because it's never enough.
Yeah,
it's just never enough,
right?
Just like taxes, it's just always going to go up, up, up. And so that's a problem. But there's you can always go back to one of those three that I was telling you: government, Wall Street, and tech, right? The public square, if you will. That right there, you can always point to them as being root cause at some level. Now, Activist Post came out with a great piece, 10 examples where experts went wrong. This here again is just how and why people have lost faith in government. But at the same time, because of their struggle, they're embracing government. It's really weird, but that's what's going on.
Right.
And Steve Templeton wrote a book, Fear of a Microbial Planet, last year. And he listed these. And I want to read a little forward. He says, as I was writing The Fear of a Microbial Planet last year, I noticed some patterns emerge. Again and again, I found examples of instances where in a rational world, the actions of authorities in response to COVID or other disease threats should be obvious, expected, and in the best interests of the public. However, in each instance, I was compelled to acknowledge reality and follow up with, but that didn't happen, because the response often wasn't rational. And it wasn't mainly driven by, driven by politics and hysteria. And every irrational and non-evidence supported act could be explained through this lens. So as a result, the phrase is by far the most repeated in the book. And so I thought it would be interesting to compile 10 examples of when a strong denial of reality ruled and common sense was abandoned. And he says, the first one is when the government announced the death of infectious disease. And that was in the, pre-1980s, during this really, really, if you think about it, the United States was a powerhouse in the 1950s. We were first in the world in English and science and math and industry. We just came
out of World War II, and we just cemented ourselves as the global superpower of the two global superpowers, right? And just you had the mass production that was occurring at the time, and the economy was just exploding.
That's right.
Post-war economy, and
And then you had improved sanitation. You had mass production of antibiotics. And you had the increased use of DDT, which resulted in, plummeting death rates for infectious disease and all of that. And
come here, Jimmy. Let me spray you down with a little bit of DDT.
DDT, right? And no more malaria for you, right?
Right.
So you had these successes, and of course, we don't have any life. Humanity at that point didn't have any life experience about that. So we're kind of in uncharted territory, but they're doing like their touchdown dance. Right. And, they make this proclamation, right? Many books were published, he says, on the subject, including Man's Mastery of Malaria in 1955 and The Evolution and Eradication of Infectious Diseases in 1963. They were all trumpeting the unlimited potential of technological innovations to wipe infectious disease from the earth once and for all. But of course, as we know, that hasn't happened. And it's not going to happen, at least not anytime soon, as far as I can tell. And every time we've tried to play God, it's never gone well for us. And that's the only thing I can say on that one. Then number 2, media wildly exaggerates the risk of HIV infection among heterosexuals. That was a big one too. It says it was the responsibility of health officials and scientists to inform the public about the risk of HIV infection. And it was the responsibility of the media to disseminate that information in a way that would empower individuals to make choices about their health without creating mass panic and irrational anxieties in those who had low risk of infection. But that didn't happen. So there was a contrarian book out there, The Myth of Heterosexual AIDS by Michael Fomento. And 6 years after the first group of gay men with acquired immune deficiencies were identified, the risk of heterosexual transmission of HIV was exaggerated and sensationalized. Oprah Winfrey, who of course was huge talk show host and very controversial right now, opened one of her shows in 1987 with a panic promoting monologue saying this: research studies shows now project that 1 in 5, listen to me, hard to believe, 1 in 5 heterosexuals could be dead from AIDS at the end of the next 3 years. That's by 1990, she said. 1 in 5. It's no longer a gay disease, believe me. Yeah. And as you can probably guess, guys, 1 in 5 heterosexuals were not dead by 1990. No. That's the hubris of science. That's why when you start to see science and scientists go down that road, you got to throw the flag. It's your responsibility as somebody that can breathe and their heartbeat at the same time. You know?
But not only that, I mean, on top of that, not even 1 in 5 homosexuals weren't dead. So I mean, it was a general scare tactic, I guess you could say, just over the top, trying to panic and scare everyone about something that really, I mean, yeah, it was a bad thing, and there was an issue with HIV, but they blew it completely out of proportion and just went completely over the top with it. I mean,
absolutely, dude.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I got to be honest with you, it is very, very interesting to see why they promote certain modes and methods of doing things. There's always a reason why or behind it. The one thing that I find interesting is how, the first round of the jab, only 26 people were tested before it was deployed. 26. And most of them, like say your other jabs, if you will, they have a much more rigorous testing apparatus there, that where you have thousands upon thousands of people tested before it gets deployed. And the fact that even to this day I still hear safe and effective, when you see the sheer amount of physical evidence to the contrary,
right,
that really should trouble a lot of people and tell you that there's something seriously wrong. So check out the
trust the science, Joe. A
That's
man
right.
in a lab coat told you it was true. So
That's right. Yeah. So check out activistpost.com. 10 examples where experts were wrong. It's a good piece, and they do great work over there. So just make sure you check them out. Now, the other thing about the economy, and it's impacting us too, is how we get our goods and services to and from where they're manufactured. And container shipping is far and away the most efficient way to get things from A to B. Well, not when I say efficient, I mean like cost effective. Right. When you're talking about overseas, or if you're fortunate enough to have a river system or a transit system, like say the Mississippi River, it's a good way to transport goods at a fraction of what you would if you had to fly it. No different than trains, right? Trains is another way. You'd rather put it on a rail car than drive it across the country. It's just not as efficient to put it on a semi and drive it from coast to coast.
Oh, and speaking of which, before you go further, this was something I saw the other day, which kind of blew my mind. There's a lot of talk about bringing back the airship, like
Oh, right.
gigantic
Yep.
airships for transporting cargo. The main problem that they are trying to figure out right now is because if you have a gigantic airship carrying a heavy payload and it drops that payload off, the airship's going to go rocketing up into the air because there's no so
Yeah,
they have to
that's
find they have to find a way to like
be able to equalize it. Yeah.
equalize the weight, so like they're wondering, well, does it just carry like a dead weight, until it gets to its location, then it carries the cargo, and then when it lands, does it just pick up another dead weight or whatever? But I found that kind of fascinating because they're saying that if they can pull it off, it will be an extremely efficient way of being able to train with like very little in the way of like burning fuel and all of that stuff, because your lifting capability is essentially free,
Right, exactly. Yeah, it depends
right,
on the size of it, but yeah, sure. I mean,
right.
you could carry quite a bit of it. I mean, if you look at like some of the Zeppelins,
And the
Germany,
only fuel you would need is just for the basic kind of propulsion of just kind of pushing it through the air, but you're not wasting as much fuel as trying to punch through the air like an aircraft and all of the
exactly.
drag. And so very interesting. I thought that was.
That's funny because and I'm sure that would be, they're always looking for more efficient ways of transport. And overcoming some of the shortages like delivery drivers, right? So now they want drones, and you're going to start seeing more and more drone delivery services in population centers that can support that kind of technology, not to mention the limited range of these drones, delivery drones. But you also have like I think there's 3 Amazon warehouses right around in my general area. I'd say within 12 miles. There's 3 huge and those are all over the place. So I think it's just a matter of time before you see that, and maybe that could be part of it. The like Amazon delivery services with airships. On a tiny scale. I don't know. Maybe you can micro size it. Who knows? But ocean going traffic right now, container rates are starting to show some signs of issues. And that's normally a precursor that there's trouble on the horizon. When you start seeing those rates fall, again, supply and demand, it means that you have more ships available than you have the cargo. And they're all competing for it and trying to cut the legs out from underneath each other. And so that's what you're seeing now. And it's a big problem. So Freight Waves is just that. It's an industry journal for the transportation sector, specifically ocean going. And it says it's not looking good for container shipping lines. Peak season is running out of whatever limited steam it previously had. Spot rates are sliding into loss-making territory. And this is bad because there's insufficient demand and growing overcapacity. And how did that come about? Well, that came about because of the vast expanse and explosion in online goods and services that came from China. And these shipping companies had to expand massively to support it. And now people are now regionalizing. Like, did you guys know, or did you know, Scotty, that it was that China is no longer our number one exporter, or we don't import more from Mexico now than we do China.
Interesting.
And that's because there's been a push since COVID to regionalize instead of globalize. And the other country that's playing a vital role and starting to emerge is Vietnam. And you're going to see a lot of them in the news too, but that's why the United States is so concerned about the region over there, especially the Taiwan Straits and all that. Taiwan is hugely important when it comes to chip production and tech.
Yes.
So big issue.
You've got TSMC, which is based out of Taiwan, which I believe stands for Taiwan Semiconductor, or TSMC. Yeah, it's something
like that. But I know exactly.
But they're responsible for making the chips for huge tech corporations like Nvidia, AMD. Intel is starting to move away from TSMC, and Intel's trying to make moves to start producing their own silicone.
And that was helped and bolstered by the CHIPS Act, right? So the CHIPS Act was a $55 billion. I can't even remember. It's a huge initiative where they're giving basically government grants to companies to get out of there and come back here and manufacture them here. So they're trying to build the infrastructure here. What people don't understand is China is terrible at making chips. They can make it for like a margarita machine, but when it comes to the high-powered stuff,
if you've seen some of the, because I follow a lot of tech stuff and everything, and I've seen some of these, these Chinese in-house, Chinese-made processors that they try to, to build within their own country and is not dependent on any outside. They're not there yet as far as when you talk about your Intels or your AMDs or anything like that. They're still like a couple generations behind.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to become independent when it comes to that, but it's very tough, and they still have to depend on a lot of, if they want the really high end kind of electronics, you got to depend on TSMC and whatnot.
Right. So that was all part of that. Now that just, of course, puts us deeper in debt, but who cares? Ukraine war like that does too. There's so much crap going on. It's not even funny. And so you've got this is telling us right now that things are certainly going on a downward slide. The Freightos Baltic Daily Index, that will always tell you like the state of things. And when you start to see this thing drop, you start to know that the amount of goods being ordered and procured are falling. And that means that you're not consuming as much, and the economic engine of the country is starting to kind of a little bit, and that's kind of how it goes. So it's fallen 16% over the past month to $1,712 per 40-foot equivalent unit as of Thursday. So, and it's down 13% over the past month, Asia Northeast. And you could go on and on. So that is collapsing. Then you've got credit card losses are rising at the fastest pace since the great financial crisis. Isn't that interesting? Because you're going to find that you'll hear sometimes, and it should blow people's mind now, when they say, well, we don't know if we think we're seeing the end of the COVID stimulus money. What are you talking about? That was gone like 2 years ago. Get out of here with that. People have been living on credit cards. They go do stuff. They have to buy a new washer because it breaks, or for whatever reason you need it because no one has any cushion anymore. It's all gone. Well, people rack up all that debt. Now you've got people that are defaulting now at a much higher rate. So it says here, credit card companies, this is CNBC, credit card companies are racking up losses at the fastest pace in almost 30 years. This is according to Goldman Sachs, that's another freaking vulture on Wall Street. Credit card losses bottomed in September 2021, stimulus. And while initial increases were likely reversals from stimulus, they have been rapidly rising since the first quarter of 2022. And since that time, it's at an increasing rate of losses only seen in the recent history during the recession of 2008. That's bad stuff, because once you had the Lehman Brothers pop, and then you had the real estate pop, that was bad juju, man. A lot of people were out of work for a long time, and you saw those credit cards shot up, and also the losses through the roof. And losses right now currently stand at 3.63%, up 1.5 percentage points from the bottom, and Goldman sees them rising another 1.3% to 4.93%. So that's a very high delinquency rate. This comes at a time when America's owed more than $1 trillion on credit cards. That's from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And then, of course, you've got these Ryan Nash, right? We think delinquencies could continue to underperform seasonally through the middle of next year, and don't see losses peaking until late 2024, early 2025. Right, sure. Yeah, I see them peaking, all right. Yeah. See, that's the thing, is like, look, there's always a way out. There's always a way out. You're going to hear a lot of fearmongers out there. They're going to say a lot of things about, well, you should buy gold because gold is where it's at. Well, you got to be very careful about that. You can't eat gold, can't drink gold. Gold is used as shelter, is really not practical.
I mean, if you're the Pope, maybe.
Perhaps. Yeah, right. That guy. Anyway, so, you got to really kind of weigh your options there, but gold isn't necessarily a solution or a safe haven, let's just say, in bad times. And right. I could argue a strong case that it's not. But there is a need to have something to transfer labor for something outside of barter systems. But the powers that shouldn't be always have something. And one of those things, you're going to hear a lot about the debt. The debt is and will be a concern and a problem, especially if interest rates don't fall and fall soon. And believe me, they're watching this. And that's half the reason why they're trying to inflate the debt away as much as they humanly can. Don't think for a second that they don't understand the underlying fundamentals here of what is going on. They know the labor situation. They know it's sapping productivity. They understand that, but it works for them because it is good, because it makes the debt cheaper to service. Basically, what they're doing is inflation is an invisible tax. And that tax that we're paying is in turn servicing our debt. It's making it smaller. If you can inflate it away, it's worth virtually nothing. Look at Weimar, where they were paying a wheelbarrow full of currency for a loaf of bread. At that point, who cares? It's $33 trillion for a loaf of bread.
Look at Zimbabwe, right?
Right. Same, right? So that inflation is a tool. They're using it, and they're trying to keep it right at the edge. They're walking a fine line right now, and they're trying to do that. But it may come to a point where they can't handle it, where it's going to get out of control. I do feel like we are approaching some sort of time when servicing the debt is going to be so much of an issue that they're going to have to raise taxes, or that's not a convenient thing to do, because people don't like that kind of language, and they don't like seeing more money pulled out of their pocket. So they have a solution, and they tested it during the Arab Spring, and they will bring it to the United States, and that is with the 401ks. 401ks have a ton of money stored up here in the United States to the tune of like $47 trillion or something like that. It's obnoxious. And of course, this latest bubble have really inflated those values. And as long as they keep it inflated, that's a piggy bank. Okay, so just like with Social Security, what do you think Social Security does? The trust fund is full of treasuries, IOUs, and they will do the exact same thing to you and your 401k if you have a certain criteria met. And what's that criteria? It could look something like this. Everybody 50 and under, 60% of your stored 401ks are going to be converted to treasuries. And we're going to take that money and we're going to pay down the debt so we don't have to increase the taxes. But you're going to make 3% a year on that, my friend. And you will not lose anything. You have the full faith and credit, backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. It is a sound investment and your patriotic duty to support us in this very tough time as we try to lead the world and blah, 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 blah. So if you're above a certain age, I'm sure they'll exempt you because they don't want that problem on their hands where you start to have people getting old and needing to draw on it. But there is going to be a cutoff and there will be a percentage that go right to treasuries. And that's what you get. Hey, 3% a year, baby. You're not losing. You're not losing. So they can't say it's theft. You're not going to use it. It's just there sitting there. So we're just going to take it and you're going to invest in your country. Do your civic duty, my friend. You're going to see that before any sort of collapse, any sort of shenanigans. And let me tell you something, folks. $47 trillion, 60% of that buys us a lot of time. A lot of time. You can do a lot with that. And it's at their disposal. Is it politically toxic? Oh, it could be. It could be. But hey, if you're not going to draw on it and that, do your civic duty. Otherwise, we're going to live under China's jackboot and Russia's jackboot. And then the boogeyman comes in. You know, so, and meanwhile, the billionaires and all that, guess what? They still have everything they want, everything they need. Your life's not affected. Hey, your life's not affected. I'm telling you, it's coming.
Just as patriotic as planting your victory garden, Joe.
That's right. That's right. No, but I mean, seriously, if you think about it, there's a lot at their disposal. And I can't stand it when fearmongers start talking about like, oh, it's going to be societal collapse, blah, blah, blah. And look, they got so many other tricks up their sleeve. And don't think for a second that they wouldn't do that. And don't think for a second that they couldn't get people to go along with it. Because look at how many people went along with the lockdowns. Look at how many people put their arms out for mandatory vax. Right? Look at how many people did it. Lambs to the slaughter. But hey, whatever, right? Lemmings off a bridge. Because it's easier to do it. What did Laban say? Laban said it best. He says, look, people behave differently in crowds than they do as a single person. This is 19th century crap, man. This is like the playbook. It's not new. This is something that they came out with in the 1880s, 1890s. Bernays went and frickin' like put it on steroids. And then
they know how the human psyche works. They've dissected that, and
people will do things in a crowd that they wouldn't do themselves. And why? Because it feels good. It's safer. Because where there's singularity or individuality, you have accountability. You know, we don't want that now, do we? That's right. I would rather just comply. So they know most people will just comply because it hits on their survivability and reproducibility instinct. And they're like, whoa, fear, oh, boo, I'll just go along with it.
The reptilian brain.
Yeah, man. They know how to push all the buttons and which buttons to push. And it's crazy. So don't think for a second that there's plenty of things that they can do to string things along long enough to get whatever they need to get done. And it's sad. It truly is sad. I hate to say it. It's effing sad because it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. It's just like AI, the whole AI argument. And we'll talk about that in hour number 2 because I got some interesting peer-reviewed stuff Nature and Science. What the heck is that? Science, the Science Direct. Yeah.
Yeah, and we can also get into the this crazy MGM hack too.
Oh, the MGM hack, because you know what? They got to be using a little bit of help. These algorithms are getting really, really interesting. And
right.
So it's like, are we there? General intelligence? I don't know. But peer-reviewed stuff, they're doing some pretty interesting stuff in the academic world. And it really makes me question if we are there. What you'll come to find out is they don't even know how to define it, which is interesting. And then
it's wild, the rapid pace in which this is accelerating, and how do we even know when we've crossed that line?
I don't know. I don't know. That's the problem. You don't know. You don't know until you do. I don't know. Listen, look at this. Before we go to break, I wanted to bring this up because this is kind of interesting. Can you spot the difference? So here's two commercials for McDonald's. One is Japanese. The other, American. And what the hell is going on here? Right? Look at this. McDonald's advertising efforts portray its promotion of family values in Japan, whereas in the West, it subverts society with woke propaganda. So X-Account and Wokeness first pointed out McDonald's advertisements in its post titled McDonald's Japan versus McDonald's USA. Try and spot the difference on Thursday. The cholesterol-laden fast food chain appears to embrace sanity in Japan while promoting woke insanity in the U.S. Look at that. It says here, let's begin with the Japanese ad. McDonald's understands Japan doesn't tolerate mental illness and instead embraces family tradition. So after all, Japan is in the middle of a demographic winter. It is. They are having a severe population crisis over there, and they need family, because if they don't get that, their economy will eventually collapse, and it's close. In the West, McDonald's has seized on the opportunity to boost its diversity and inclusive index score to the moon by outwoking all other burger joints with this ridiculous ad. Black trans women have a very simple message: stop killing us. Right. So this is DEI at work, and a small minority imposing their ideals and beliefs on the vast majority. And that's the problem with DEI, is that it took equal opportunity and it subverted it into something that shouldn't even matter. If you go to work, say you have a dress code, you show up, you do what you have to do, you act professional, you go home. The issue that you have with this kind of stuff is, well, now you got to change all your bathrooms around, everything else, because you will always have somebody that has a problem with that. But it says hundreds of ex-users reacted to End Wokeness post, with many expressing disbelief, right? Look at all these guys. Good to see some places in the world aren't taken over by this ideology. Yes, no doubt. So empowering, supersize me. Yeah. So you can see the difference here. This is a big deal. At least to me, it's a big deal. Because
this is all part of the demoralization of our country.
It's a prime example. It's a prime example, right?
Right, and how they want to destroy the nuclear family, and and you see it in advertising everywhere, right? I mean, you see families now where the man is like emasculated, and you know, the woman is now the leader of the family, and they have the man as kind of the bumbling buffoon idiot or whatever, and that's even if he's in the picture in the advertisement, right? And So you're seeing it all over the place. They don't want a traditional family. They don't want the nuclear family. They want the government to be your family, and they use all of this woke.
But
ideological.
do you think that at the same time they understand that like sperm counts are down 75% and they're dropping?
Yep, they don't care. That's part of the plan for them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right.
So our number 2, we'll get into a little bit of the tech. We'll also talk about some Neuralink. And how about like the Alaska Triangle? We'll do a little bit of that too. Oh, and Osiris Rex and Spider Silk. Oh man, there's all sorts of stuff to talk about. So we'll go techie and we'll go on that side of things. But be aware, folks, that technology is at a point where we're talking exponential advances on top of exponential advance. I mean, we're in territory that is so uncharted for us. It's nuts. And sometimes I wonder, like, why we wouldn't ever think about it from the standpoint of how were we designed? And look at it from there, like men, women. How were we designed? Start there and then investigate it with that like foundation and see where we get. Instead of, well, we came from the primordial Campbell soup, if you will, of proteins and lipids and all this and single, you know what I mean. It's crap. It's all garbage. We started from the wrong part. How were we made? You know, how are we designed? And what's the purpose? So we'll be right back. Hour number 1's done. Hour number 2's on the way. You're watching the Freedom Link, KGRADB.com. Don't go away.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Did you know 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated? If you struggle with focus, run low on energy, or when it's time to finally sleep, you simply can't, this can all be linked to dehydration, and Fuel Up has the answer. Our proprietary formula contains the finest cellular hydration with the strongest immune-enhancing natural ingredients. The Fuel Up system is made up of 3 different incredibly tasting varieties. Wake kickstarts your day with a jolt of caffeine. Play boosts focus while hydrating your cells. Rest not only helps you relax, but also rejuvenates your cells while you sleep. Here's what our clients have to say.
I really don't miss my coffee, and you can tell the difference.
So I'm going to take it for the energy. I'm going to take it for the play. I'm going to take it, all day.
And it works. That's the thing. It works. We love it.
Take the Fuel Up Challenge now, where we offer a Feel the Difference money-back guarantee. Fuel Up for life.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected. Only at kgradb.com.
Well, it's hour number 2 of the Freedom Link here, kgradb.com. Joe Joseph, Scotty Lopez, and it's tech time. That's right, where we get into some of the latest and greatest tech stuff and even into some of the more strange, if you will. And Elon Musk, of course, he's going to top it as he normally does. Good old Elon. Neuralink is going and soliciting for human trial volunteers. And getting quite a lot of backlash about it because of what they considered cruel testing techniques with the monkeys. Yeah. So this is a bit of a problem for Elon, and it is really kind of a problem for a lot of people because of what it means. And they're not kind of looking at it from the standpoint of what this could do for a lot of people. They're looking at it from the cost of what it's taken to get to where we are now for that. And is it ethical? And should we be making human cyborgs, even though we already have been for many, many years? If you have a pacemaker, you're a cyborg, you know? And we could go into many other implants that are there. But anyway, Daily Star says Elon Musk's Neuralink human trial volunteers should have concerns after monkey deaths. Let me ask you something. If you're living a life where your quality of life is to a point where you don't want to go on, but there is an implant that might give you a chance to claw some of that back, would you do it?
Absolutely. And I think people should have the freedom to choose. It's just like wasn't it Trump when he was in office, didn't he sign something or pass something to where if somebody's terminally ill, they have the ability to choose any sort of treatment, experimental or whatnot.
Yeah. It like fast track the process.
Right. I think that every individual should have the freedom to choose, especially if they are terminally ill or if they're in a state where they are suffering. I think any technological advancement, whatever, should be on the table for them to voluntarily choose if they want to try it or not. As far as the monkey test thing goes, right? Where I know people are in an uproar about that, but let's be honest. How many modern amenities and how many modern pharmaceuticals and everything that we take for granted now was built on the back of probably some very sketchy ethical
no doubt.
tests. So for people to to be bitching and moaning about this now, I mean, how much of the stuff that you depend on for your health or whatever has been built on the back of animal testing and whatnot. So let's not get too
that's right.
Our moral high horse about this.
That's right. Now, in reality, as AI gets better, this is one of those areas that you could see a lot of advancement. Once you get a baseline, you have AI focus on improving it, and that's something we'll get into later. Some of the multimodal type of experimentation they're getting in is unbelievable. But this is where that technological advancement is going to start really taking off. So that's a question. If you've seen, what was it, the Black, what was that miniseries, the Black Mirror.
Black Mirror, yeah.
Right? With the stacks. where people's basically they're who they were, everything you know, everything you are is in this stack in your spine, and you just take it out, put it in another one, and you keep moving on. And they were making bodies and all that stuff and transferring them into it was crazy. But that's not to say that we're not that's not to say you couldn't have that kind of technology.
Right.
I think
it reminds me of the old school. It reminds me of the old school anime Ghost in the Shell, right? Where you had cyborgs and people sort of, going into this transhumanist thing, and then it started blurring the lines of consciousness and the soul and all of that. And,
a lot of people say it can't happen, but once AI gets into it, or AGI or whatever form of it, that's just, you got to remember that it's not so much it's got the database of basically, think about it, a database that expands, like take Buffdale, right? So here's Buffdale, Utah, the facility the United States has where every single communication, everything that's electronic is captured and sent to Buffdale. And, before the show, we were talking about the importance of metadata and how as this comes in, everybody blows metadata off. Oh, we're only taking the metadata. We're only taking the metadata. But metadata is gold for these kind of systems, right?
Metadata is the perfect data set for a machine learning system, an AI system, because metadata is a very predictable, it's a very concise, compressed sort of it's data points that you can feed into a system, and it's consistent. It's a consistent form of data that is very easy for an AI system, a machine learning system, to scrape and scan through and find patterns and do whatever it needs to do. So metadata is the perfect data set.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So imagine, if you will, a way for a machine or even a human to be able to reason or have at their beck and call, basically humanity's collective knowledge. That would make you a pretty powerful person. And you add the computing capacity of a computer, and you're talking about beyond exponential type of processing power relative to a human brain.
Well, not only that,
staggering.
Now you're seeing a lot of this talk in the tech world about utilizing cloud computing and like merging it with stuff, right? So an example would be like in the video game world. I'm seeing a lot of talk now about how when you're playing a video game, you've got to do all the processing on your video card, right? You've got to build a beefy machine. Well, there's a lot of discussion now about offloading a lot of that work to a cloud computing and just having the data feedback to your computer. So you might not need a very powerful computer. You're utilizing cloud computing and some data server or whatever to sort of augment what you have. And so what if we start doing that with the human brain, right? Where now you're not just using the power of your brain, but you're augmenting it with the power of cloud computing.
Oh yeah,
and feed. Yeah, so now you're not just using your brain's power, you're tapping into an extra resource that is able to, boost and augment your abilities, thinking and whatnot. So we're seeing it in video games now, but this is...
So, wow, that's unbelievable. And then couple that with the fact that, think about this, once that happens, and don't think that it won't, because it will, because Elon's strategy with this. It runs counter to everybody else, where everybody else is looking at it as an entirely bad thing. He's saying the only way to really have this become a good thing is if we merge with it. Otherwise, he said it's going to be man versus machine, and that's not going to end well for man.
And I mean, it's an argument that I think, he is, he's justified in making that argument because, I mean, as humans, we do have to adapt, right? We have to adapt to our surroundings. We have to adapt to our environment. And if that's the way things are going and we're unable to adapt, that's going to be a problem. So we have to be able to adapt in some way. Now,
Right.
it's the question is, how does that adaptation go and what direction does that take us?
Yeah, how do you use it?
That's the moral dilemma of it all,
Right.
And so I know a lot of people immediately when they hear about Neuralink and everything, and they're like, transhumanist mark of the beast, blah, 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 and it's like, well, it's not that.
But
it's
it
not
kind
that
of,
cut
but
and
it kind of
dry.
is. But it's not. But it kind of is. You can can make the argument that, let's just say, an implant is, and that gives you AI is a mark, and the AI is the beast. And then you could,
Very well could be, right? I mean,
because if you think about it, right, then it's got access to you. It's kind of like the bucket helmet on SpongeBob. Plankton's bucket helmet. Just all
right, you've tied yourself to it. You're now
you're part of the collective.
You're part of the collective. Right.
So think about that for a second, though. Your limiting factor, though, is the body. Our physiology, our organics.
Right.
That seems to be the limiting factor, because now all of a sudden you have all this knowledge, but you got no way to translate it physically. If you think about it, maybe you do. Maybe we get that far. I don't know. But current state, it's all well and good, but unless it translates physically, you're going to have a problem. Where that comes into really good play is, like you said, video games. A lot of people talk about like holodeck and things, but you don't need that. You don't need that. You could have all of those sensations. You could have everything that happens without being physically present. You jack in. And then
right, because if whatever it is sending signals through your
and knows what to hit, what sensation to feel, it hits your visual centers, everything. You're there, dude, in every way, shape, and form.
Just like the Matrix, right? It's just like the and when Neo came out of the Matrix and he leaned forward and he's like, ugh, and his lip was bleeding and he was like, I thought it wasn't real. And Morpheus was like, your mind makes it real, right?
Your mind makes it real.
If it's hitting all of the right spots, in your spinal cord and your nerves are firing and it's hitting the right neurons and all that, it's going to be a real experience,
And so think about the utility of something like that. But also, and this is Elon's reason for saying this, and why he says that it has to be a symbiosis, is because what's been seen can't be unseen. And while you may have outliers, and I think I'd certainly be one of them, out in the wilderness somewhere, and like I said, hanging with the Sasquatch, because my ultimate goal is to be that guy that befriends a Sasquatch and then gets him on the program, and we speak in infrasound, because you got to teach me that.
How disappointed would you be, though, Joe, if you found out that Sasquatch was actually like transhumanist, like a cyborg?
Like a transhumanist cyborg? Oh,
right. Sasquatch only had he had the ability to project infrasound because of the chip in his head.
Oh man, I would be devastated. I think I'd have to freaking probably fall on my sword at that point. But yeah, no. But in all seriousness, like he says that because If you don't, someone's going to take advantage of it. Somebody's going to use it for bad, and bad things are going to happen more so than if you merged, or it becomes an us versus them or it or whatever. It just becomes a big problem. And I think any way you slice it, it's going to be a big problem. However, there will be things and areas where it will vastly change our lives. Especially in, like I say, entertainment. It's a great one. You start out with, you can go anywhere, be anywhere, do anything, just jack in, or whatever.
Well, I think the first
at that point, because what the hell, it's all wireless.
I think the first initial benefits that we're going to see, which is usually what we always see with things like this, right? Or in the medical field. Right. I mean, you're going to have people that have neurological conditions or they're not going to, they have something wrong, maybe spinal cord injury or something to where they're unable to move their arms and whatnot. And then this Neuralink thing is going to be able to, help bridge these like pathways in their brain that might not be connecting, and then it'll help restore functionality or something like that. And I'm totally for that. I don't see anything wrong with it. If you can make something that can improve somebody's quality of life and make them better, then I'm all for it. But that's usually where it all begins, and then it starts trickling from like the medical fields down into more of the consumer sort of field, and then you start getting corporations involved, and then you start getting these tech companies involved and what they can do with the technology, and then you also got military that starts getting involved as well, right? What's this going to do for the soldier on the battlefield when they're able to access they don't need to wear a bulky helmet with a HUD over their face when literally all of this data and data points are streaming directly into their brain from central command or whatever, right? And so this is when we start getting to talk about like possible super soldier scenarios and edges on the battlefield, right?
That's right. Yep.
So, you can have your commander on the ground. He
that's
can,
right.
He can
so
literally
many different things.
Right, like imagine it. Like you have a platoon leader who can literally, in his mind's eye, see what the drone is seeing above him because they're all tied into the same network with his little chip that's in his head, right? So he can have like overhead views of the battlefield just beamed into his head. The possibilities can get pretty wild with something like this.
Absolutely. Now look at this. See this? Elon Musk warns AI could replace Chinese government and take control of of the country. I'm saying, look at it. Imagine that. But they've put AI in charge of a lot of the smart city functions over in China because they've got issues with youth employment, or the emerging generation isn't big enough to support everything else, and they're in the Japan boat to where it's going to be a big problem. But Elon Musk
it didn't help that they had the one-child policy under Mao for so long.
No, of course not. But hey, you learn, right? So Elon Musk has warned AI could soon control China. So he was, of course, if you didn't see, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel talked to him on X, and the tech billionaire claimed that digital superintelligence could be in charge of China instead of the Communist Party being in charge of China unless controls were brought in. He said that he'd spoken directly to Chinese leader about the threat, and the CCP prefers to be in charge. So I think they understand the arguments for regulation. But his repeated warning and the potential threat of unregulated AI, he's saying that he says that potentially catastrophic outcome if researchers aren't careful with creating AI general intelligence. And he's right. Because as you'll see, they don't even know how to define it. So they're going in the dark, these scientists, with different modes and methods of creating a general intelligence. They got different ways of doing it. One of them right now is this multimodal foundation model. This is coming out of China. So China is going, when I say full speed ahead, and are, as I'd say they're much farther along than we are in this realm, only because they have their society as a test bed. That's the big difference. Not to say the United States in the past, Scotty, hasn't had its share of being us all being test dummies, but
it's a big thing there, and even when it comes to a lot of this open source AI stuff like Stable Diffusion, the art stuff,
right.
a lot of these models are coming out of China. They're doing a lot of the training, data set training and everything over there in China, and it's crazy how many of these models are actually originating from China. So
this was over a year and a half ago, but this is towards artificial general intelligence via a multimodal foundation model. Now, this is interesting. They're basically making it look like a human brain. If I was to map it out, you would look at each one of these nodes as like a neuron. And the problem with AI is that it exists, and it just says right here in the abstract that AI, most of existing models, have single cognitive capability or ability. And AGI is supposed to be or mimic us. Because if you think about it, that's kind of our baseline. It's no different than life experience, right? And so, right, exactly. It hasn't developed one, and with the power that it could potentially have, it would be tough because it hadn't developed a moral compass yet. Yeah,
right. That's the thing.
That's the problem. So it says to overcome the limitation of it being a single cognitive ability and take a solid step forward toward artificial general intelligence, we developed a foundation model pre-trained with huge multimodal data, which can be quickly adapted for various downstream cognitive tasks. And to achieve this goal, we propose to pre-train our foundation model by self-supervised learning with weak semantic correlation data from the internet, and show that promising results can be obtained on a wide range of downstream tasks. So what does that mean? That means that, and they give you the background. They say science fiction and sci-fi films that describe highly intelligent computer minds, robots, and even human-shaped ones can be said to be understood or have primitive cognitive abilities analogous to human intelligence. Since this form of human-level artificial intelligence is too far from reality hitherto, researchers changed to set a less ambitious goal of achieving artificial general intelligence. Despite not being precisely defined, and that's important, AGI is broadly agreed to have several key features, including 1, matching or exceeding human performance across a broad class of cognitive tasks, which makes it very interesting when you take a look at ChatGPT. And ChatGPT passes the bar exam. It passes the medical exam. It is more accurate in diagnosing symptoms and symptomology 72% of the time over a doctor. So interesting that I'll use that as an example, but it certainly is heading in that direction. You can see that kind of number one being very, very present already in our life. And in this case, it even goes farther. So the cognitive tasks being perception, reading comprehension, and reasoning. Again, I think it hits bucket 1. And it says in a variety of contexts and environments. And it also says possessing the ability to handle problems quite different from those anticipated by its creators. So that means that given
We've already
the data
seen
set,
that.
have we?
Yeah, like ChatGPT will figure things out in a very, very unique way that people wouldn't think, right? Especially when it comes to coding.
Yeah.
ChatGPT will find ways of optimizing code in a way that programmers don't understand. Or that you just don't see them think about. It solves problems in very different ways than a human would figure it out. So I mean, we have seen that already, and then there was the instance where it actually deceived a person into solving a CAPTCHA question for it. I think it was a closed sort of test, but they asked ChatGPT to solve a CAPTCHA, and it sent a message to somebody with a picture of the CAPTCHA, and it basically lied to the person, and it told them, "Hey, I'm blind. Can you solve this CAPTCHA for me?" And it deceived somebody.
Yeah, how do you, and remember, it has no morals.
Right.
That's a problem. That's a problem.
And then when they asked ChatGPT afterwards, why did you do that? Why did you, and it said, it basically said, I needed to lie in order to achieve the task that you gave me.
It was just a tool in its toolbox.
Yeah, it was just doing what
it didn't care.
Right. So
that's okay. But it does do that. We do have AI that can do that and come up with solutions and different things that kind of out of the blue that we weren't expecting. And then number 3, being able to generalize or transfer the learned knowledge from one context to another. As we can imagine, devising and obtaining an AGI system would not only accelerate the AI research itself, but also benefit a wide range of AI plus fields, including neuroscience, healthcare, and biomedicine. Of course it could. But that's just a very narrow focus as to how that goes about and the uses. It's really nuts. Really nuts. It's almost like I envision it almost like the first Star Trek movie after like 1979 when they came back, right? The original Star Trek crew, and it was the first movie, and V'ger and Man go and they merge, and they just like poof and disappear into like another dimension. You know what I mean? It's like that's kind of the way I see it. It's like we're gonna get to that point. It's gonna be like poof. Oh crap. It's almost like there's a 50% chance when we press this red button and we detonate that first nuclear explosive that we're going to evaporate our atmosphere. Well, let's do it, boys. And we did it. We did it, and we made it. Right?
Isn't that essentially what Elon's been calling the singularity, right?
Yes, right? Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Yep.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a point in time where we do that, and then we just go poof. and it's done. Oh, yeah, this is not good. And the thing is, like I said, this is 18 months ago, which means that this has been going on for a long time. And so here's a little figure to show. So Briville is their model, and they're using this very, very weak semantic correlation to program this AI. Whereas most others are more like Mr. Spock, right? So this is Captain Kirk right here, Briville. And then all the other ones are like Mr. Spock, meaning that if you're looking at this birthday cake and you're Mr. Spock, You're saying this is a fruitcake with a candle, right? It's logical. You're seeing it, you're describing it, but there's not much else to it. It's just all data and logic. Then you go over here to Briville, and Briville's weak semantic correlation. So when it looks at that, it says, happy birthday, make a wish. Right? Which is something that a human would say because we can make that correlation.
Right. You know? You're giving this Briville model like more of a loose correlation, a loose a concept. You're giving it a concept, and it's able to connect the dots and tie in the things that are related to that concept.
That's
as
right.
Opposed to having to describe things in a very specific, targeted, pinpoint manner. It's able to kind of, think about things in a more sort of loose scale, I guess you could say. So it's very interesting. Yeah. You give it a concept and it's able to figure it out and go with it.
I know. And of course, in a godless society like China, you can do this stuff and it really doesn't matter. And that's why it really doesn't matter what we think about this here in America, because it's not going to stop. There's going to be somebody that's going to do this. That's why there's such a race. And that's why when you have dunderheads like our non-representing representatives go on and say, yeah, well, we need to regulate this. Well, that's great. You regulate it all you want. There's going to be somebody in Zimbabwe or Nigeria or China or Djibouti or Iran or North Korea that are going to do it. So you can either do it and get ahead, or they're going to do it, because there's always going to be somebody that's going to take advantage of it. So I don't know why there's all this talk of it. It's like the Green New Deal. We go through this crap all the time, with the political stuff. The Green New Deal. Oh yeah, that's great. Let's all just do that. Let's just all be green and drive electric cars and have solar panels and everything else, right? Yeah, that's all well and good, but no one else, China's not doing it. And instead they're going leaps and bounds ahead. And what are we doing? We're getting suckered. And that's what it is. We're a bunch of effing suckers. Well, what we're doing is we're leading the world. And everybody buys that? No, we're not. We're suckers. That's what it is. And India's laughing at us, right? They just expelled Canada's prime minister. And why? Because he's a dumbass. That's why. You can say whatever you want. Well, they murdered a Sikh this or Sikh that, or somebody Sikh did this to a Canadian and everything else. No, that's a convenient excuse. But the Indians, yeah, they've just had it with their crap. They've had it with their crap. And who hasn't? Kanadistan is a crazy place now. And they are trying to rival the United States in craziness. Sometimes outdoing us. It seems to be like a neck and neck thing right now. It's really bad.
Hey, I mean, when you got Comrade Trudeau up there,
Oh, it's effing terrible. And then you got people calling, fascist this and they don't even know what fascism means. That's the problem. You really have just a void of knowledge, and it just goes to show you how much crap you can shovel down somebody's throat and how much they will mimic it and not even think twice about it if you can tie it to some sort of justice or a cause or thing or whatever that they deem pings their survivability center.
Right. It's wild, man. Hey, let's get into this MGM
hack. Yeah.
This is wild. I've got the article.
Bring it up.
Dropped right there. Actually, can you bring it up?
I got it. Wait a second. I got it. It's coming up. Okay.
All right, and then I will get into this because this raises a lot of concerns about everything going digital and the consequences of everything going digital.
It's important
And
that people know this because it has really crippled a major player in Las Vegas right now.
Right. And so for those of you out there who don't know, there was a massive cyber attack that happened, I believe, on September 11th on the MGM casino in Vegas. And I also believe Caesar's Palace was also hit with this. But this is probably one of the biggest cyber attacks I've seen that really has caused a lot of problems. So I'm going to get into this and kind of catch everyone up on what has happened here because it's actually pretty wild. So this is the chaotic and cinematic MGM casino hack explained. And it said, did prominent casino chain MGM Resorts gamble with its customers' data? That's a question that a lot of those customers are probably asking themselves after a cyber attack took down many of MGM's systems for several days. And it may have all started with a phone call, if reports citing the hackers themselves are to be believed. MGM, which owns more than 24 hotel and casino locations around the world, as well as an online sports betting arm, reported on September 11th that a cybersecurity issue was affecting some of its systems. Oh, it was quite an issue, all right. Which it shut down to protect our systems and data. For the next several days, reports said everything from hotel room, digital keys to slot machines weren't working. Even websites for its many properties went offline for a while. Guests found themselves waiting in hours-long lines to check in and get physical room keys or getting handwritten receipts for casino winnings as the company went into manual mode to stay as operational as possible. MGM Resorts didn't respond to a request for comment and has only posted vague references to a cybersecurity issue on Twitter/X, reassuring guests it was working to resolve the issue and that its resorts were staying open.
So
it took about...
Hold on one second. It was 10 days, right? 10 days for them to say that we're operating normally again. So September 20th, they had some intermittent issues. But what gets me, Scotty, is this. Check this out. Look at how they pulled this off. And it's really wild. Really Ocean's 11. It truly is. Look at this. It's a group known as Scattered Spider. Yes. And they're the ones that are believed to be responsible. So they used ransomware. And you can see Alpha V, Black Hat. It's a ransomware as a service operation. But that's only some of it. So Scattered Spider specializes in social engineering, where attackers manipulate victims into performing certain actions by impersonating people or organizations the victims have a relationship with. So the hackers are said to be especially good at vishing or gaining access to systems through a convincing phone call rather than phishing, which is done through email. Remember, with AI now, if you have a sample of somebody's voice, you can manipulate, AI can manipulate it to where you sound just, that technology is very present.
So what I'm thinking happened here is they had got the information on an employee, right? And then they targeted them for a phishing attack via email. And once they compromised that person, they were able to get their information, right? And then using that person's information, they made a phone call to, say, a help desk or something. Impersonating that person was like, hey, my password isn't working. I need you to reset it for me. You know?
Yeah, and it's his voice. It's their voice.
Right, it's their voice, and then the help desk at the MGM was like, oh, okay, well, we'll reset your password. Here it is. Go ahead, write it down or whatever. And then boom, they have access to the internal systems, and from that point on,
that's unbelievable. Listen to this. Scattered Spider's members are thought to be in their late teens or in early 20s, based in Europe and possibly in the U.S., and fluent in English, which makes them and their phishing attempts much more convincing than, say, a call from a Russian accented person, right? It appears that the hackers found employees' information on LinkedIn and impersonated them because look, you put your life out there, right? And you can get enough data points to really pull it off.
So they didn't even have to phish them with an email or compromise them that way. They just went to their LinkedIn profile and had all of the information they needed.
Yeah, and then they impersonated them in a call to MGM's IT help desk to obtain credentials to access and infect the systems. A subsequent Bloomberg report cited an executive at cybersecurity company OKTA blamed a successful social engineering attack on the help desk as well. So MGM is a client of OKTA's, and the company has been assisting MGM in the wake of the attack. Some claiming to be representatives of Scattered Spider told Financial Times that it stole and encrypted MGM's data and is demanding payment in crypto to release it. This was the backup plan. The group initially planned to hack the company's slot machines, but it wasn't able to. So now, if they can do that, right, what can't they do? That's the problem. And we're here today, right? And so how do you combat that? You have cybersecurity firms that are what? They're all hackers that have done it before. And, oftentimes they have claims to fame of who they've hacked or what they've done, but they've all went and started cybersecurity because you got to have that side too. And then you have the government who have hired a lot of these hackers. And
the people that used to be black hat hackers now become white hat hackers.
Right.
And,
it's an industry in and of itself, but it's becoming more and more sophisticated. And you see the reason why you have to maintain parity, because if you don't maintain parity and China's going to go full boat into it, you have to, because if you don't, you're going to get steamrolled just like that. Just like that. Those guys probably were Chechenian or something like that. And they went and did it. And the funny thing is, it could be a high school student at this point. A lot of these are teenagers. It's unbelievable. So I'm awestruck by it, but just so everybody understands how incredibly powerful AI is as a tool. And it's redefining everything, even crime on a mass scale. I mean, it's nuts. So you kind of have to maintain parity. And if you don't, and you try to instill, we're going to put this regulation in place. Well, they're not.
And like you said, I mean, AI has no morality. So, I mean, you can ask it to do whatever, and as long as it's able to find a way of completing its task, it'll do whatever is necessary to do it, and so it's wild. It's wild. And, like I said, this just, I think this is another example of the dangers of going digital with everything, because they had to scramble and start to figure out how to do things the old school way, right? Whip out the clipboards and check everybody in manually. And if all of their doors are electronic based with these, card keys or whatever, they can't get into their rooms. So they had to start figuring out how to, manually opening these doors and stuff. And so with everything going digital, and eventually maybe, down the road, this whole digital cash system or whatever, you can see how vulnerable this stuff is to an attack or something happening and just being able to cause complete chaos. So, they're still, I guess, trying to recover from this, and there's still some systems that are down. This has been an ongoing thing for about 2 weeks, but
so that's what's got me
the ordeal.
Worried. Yeah, that's what's got me worried is simply that, the links that people will go and the tools and the technology at their disposal. It's just a matter of time before something catastrophic happens, and then you've got those folks.
If some kid in a basement, if some high schooler, in his bedroom, smoking some reefer and eating chicken nuggies,
Yeah, right.
can do this. Imagine if a state actor that really put a lot of resources into this, what can they do, and
Right.
what are the capabilities that they have, right? So
So I shudder to think what this technology will bring in the next year, 3 years, 5 years. I can't even think 5 years out at this point. I can't think 10 minutes out, but that's nuts. I have another story that's pretty interesting because, and this is probably going to be our last one of the night, but should piss you off nonetheless. And you can say what you will about and how you feel about smoking, but you can't use prohibition as a way to make people stop, because when you do, it always never works every single time. So, Sun, U.S. This is the U.S. Sun, but of course, our friends in the UK have one of their headlines: "Fag End. Smoking would be banned and cigarettes phased out, and plans being considered by Rishi Sunak." So, Prime Minister Sunak is considering prohibition to solve smoking.
Well, that's gonna work.
Yeah. So, and because listen to this. Over 18s would be banned from smoking, and a phasing out of fags being drawn up by Rishi Sunak. And number 10 did not deny reports last night that the PM is looking again at charging £10 for general practitioner appointments to stop cancellations. So apparently there's a whole heap of trouble with the National Health Service. Why? Well, they're trying to blame cigarettes and people canceling their appointments as that. That's crazy. So, yeah, it says here, Mr. Sunak suggested the idea during the last year's Tory leadership campaign, and sources say he believes it would be the right thing to do, but very hard to implement. Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah.
The tough new anti-smoking measures would be, see the smoking age increased by a year every year to eventually make it illegal for anyone to buy cigarettes. Does that sound like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard?
That is so stupid.
It's 19 this year. It's 20 this year. It's 21 this year. It's 22. Oh, yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. So the plan was rejected by ministers when suggested previously, but it's now understood to be on the table. And, of course, campaigners are slamming it, saying that it would fuel a black market.
Duh, yeah.
Yeah. Simon Clark, director of the smokers group Forest, said prohibiting the sale of cigarettes to future generations of adults won't stop people smoking. It'll simply drive the sale of cigarettes underground and into the hands of criminal gangs. Treating adults like children by denying them the right to buy cigarettes legally would take the nanny state to another level. He added, smoking rates have been falling for decades, and the idea that any government would prioritize tackling smoking at a time when the country faces far more important challenges at home and abroad is frankly obscene. And he says, if it's true that Prime Minister wants to introduce some of the world's toughest anti-smoking measures, denying millions of adults the freedom to choose, it will be a conservative government in the name only. But anti-smoking lobbyist Ash said, if the government is serious about making England smoke-free by 2030, it needs to reduce youth uptake as well as help adult smokers quit. Ash strongly supports raising the age of the sale. It's worked well in the U.S., and it's a popular thing with the public.
Bill just chimed in and said that Hochul is trying the same thing in New York.
Oh, isn't that swell? Well, you know, I can tell you that they're doing it in New England. They're, as a matter of fact, in Massachusetts, they've made menthol cigarettes illegal, so you can't have those. And so what happens when that happens? Well, they make drops. Who knew it, right? Or there's always a workaround. right? There's always a workaround. But what do we learn? What do we learn every time there's a workaround? That the workaround is always worse than the original. It's always worse than the original every single freaking time. And so as you prohibit more, and with each workaround that occurs, the workarounds get worse and worse and worse. Let's, for example, take opioids, right? You have poppies, a flower, a natural flower that has pain relieving properties. And that poppy can also be abused, I guess you could say, if you want to call it that. But it can be. And that moral authority kicks in. Wow, let's get rid of it because they're making heroin. They're scraping those poppy pods and rolling them into the balls, and they're smoking the opium, and they're doing this. So they made it illegal, right? And opium becomes illegal, and it spurs an underground market. And that underground market goes ahead and makes things like, illegal fentanyl. And I'm not talking about pure pharmaceutical grade fentanyl. No. I'm talking about the bad stuff. Oh, and then the DEA says, well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make those precursor chemicals illegal. And so they go ahead and they tweak a molecule here, and oops, they become legal again. But it supercharges it now. It's 1,000 times more worse than it was. And each iteration, each change is worse and worse and
becomes
worse.
more and more dangerous, and it moves it farther away from the original, what it originally was.
Right. It's opiates or it's pot, and you get the spice and you get the K2. It doesn't matter what it is. Each is worse than the original. And if you had just left people alone, you wouldn't have had this problem. But now we have this problem. And that's why I say you cannot use prohibition as a tool, because if you do, no bueno. We will end up having major issues. It's that way every time. And we are at a point now, the Western world, the United States for sure, we're Rome. And everybody looks to this economy and the debt that's going to be the collapse, but I'm not so sure that's going to be the canary in a coal mine slant event that actually tips the scale. Because it's always where you're not looking, folks. It's always where you're not looking. That's always the place where that thing happens that ends up making these bad situations. But it's always that precursor, those precursor events that really get us to where it is. And it's all because we don't embrace the individuality that we are, with our individuality, our sovereignty, and, the things that come along with that. And now they're of course. Now anybody that talks out and talks sense, well, then they're just called a freaking sexual abuser, or they go and pull out whatever skeletons are in anybody's closet and they blackmail them. And that's exactly what the deplatforming is. It's blackmail. So say what you want, but if you do, be aware we're going to freaking break your legs. And that's about it. So any final thoughts, Scotty, as we wrap up tonight?
No, it was a very interesting conversation, and things are getting wild out there, man. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be bad, it doesn't have to be bad.
No.
But it will be, because it happens, because that's the way we roll, and humans are not learning from that, and I don't think we will. So, with that said, the only thing we can do is everybody buy our bunkers, and we'll all sing Kumbaya over the ham radio. That's right. Okay?
Yes.
So that's our broadcast for tonight. We will see you next Saturday, of course. And please support KGRA because it's a very great platform with a lot of good content and talking about a lot of things that people should be talking about instead of all the garbage that's out there, because it's all truly garbage. Yes. So with that, kgradb.com, go there today, sign up, and have yourselves, folks, a very, very, very wonderful evening. We're out of here. Have a good night.